100 Years of Solitude. It is a landmark 1967 novel by Colombian author Gabriel García Márquez that tells the multi-generational story of the Buendía family, whose patriarch, José Arcadio Buendía, founded the town of Macondo, a fictitious town in the country of Colombia. The magical realist style and thematic substance of 100 Years of Solitude established it as an important representative novel of the literary Latin American boom of the 1960s and 1970s, which was stylistically influenced by modernism, European and North American, and the Cuban vanguardia, avant-garde, literary movement. Since it was first published in May 1967 in Buenos Aires by Editorial Sudamericana, 100 Years of Solitude has been translated into 37 languages and sold more than 30 million copies. The novel, considered García Márquez's magnum opus, remains widely acclaimed and is recognized as one of the most significant works in the Spanish literary canon. 100 Years of Solitude is the story of 7 generations of the Buendía family in the town of Macondo. The founding patriarch of Macondo, José Arcadio Buendía, and Ursula Iguarán, his wife and first cousin, leave Riohacha, Colombia, after José Arcadio kills Prudencio Aguilar after a cockfight for suggesting José Arcadio was impotent. One night of their emigration journey, while camping on a riverbank, José Arcadio dreams of Macondo, a city of mirrors that reflected the world in and about it. Upon awakening, he decides to establish Macondo at the riverside. After days of wandering the jungle, his founding of Macondo is utopic. José Arcadio Buendía believes Macondo to be surrounded by water, and from that island, he invents the world according to his perceptions. Soon after its foundation, Macondo becomes a town frequented by unusual and extraordinary events that involve the generations of the Buendía family, who are unable or unwilling to escape their periodic, mostly self-inflicted, misfortunes. For years the town is solitary and unconnected to the outside world, with the exception of the annual visit of a band of gypsies, who show the townspeople technology such as magnets, telescopes, and ice. The leader of the gypsies, a man named Melquiades, maintains a close friendship with José Arcadio, who becomes increasingly withdrawn, obsessed with investigating the mysteries of the universe presented to him by the gypsies. Ultimately he is driven insane, speaking only in Latin, and is tied to a chestnut tree by his family for many years until his death. Eventually Macondo becomes exposed to the outside world and the government of newly independent Colombia. A rigged election between the conservative and liberal parties is held in town, inspiring Orleano Buendía to join a civil war against the conservative government. He becomes an iconic revolutionary leader, fighting for many years and surviving multiple attempts on his life, but ultimately tires of war and signs a peace treaty with the conservatives. Disillusioned, he returns to Macondo and spends the rest of his life making tiny goldfish in his workshop. The railroad comes to Macondo, bringing in new technology and many foreign settlers. An American fruit company constructs a banana plantation outside the town and builds its own segregated village across the river. This ushers in a period of prosperity that ends in tragedy as the Colombian army massacres thousands of striking plantation workers, an incident based on the Banana Massacre of 1928. José Arcadio II, the only survivor of the massacre, finds no evidence of the massacre and the surviving townspeople refuse to believe it happened. By the novel's end, Macondo has fallen into a decrepit and near-abandoned state, with the only remaining Buendías being Amaranta Ursula and her nephew Orleano. Orleano's parentage is hidden by his grandmother Fernanda, and he and Amaranta Ursula unknowingly begin an incestuous relationship. They have a child who bears the tail of a pig, fulfilling the lifelong fear of the long-dead matriarch Ursula. Amaranta Ursula dies in childbirth and the child is devoured by ants, leaving Orleano as the last member of the family. He decodes an encryption Melquiades left behind in a manuscript generations ago. The secret message informs the recipient of every fortune and misfortune the Buendia family's generations lived through. As he reads the manuscript, a wind destroys all traces of Macondo's existence. Symbolism and metaphors. A dominant theme in 100 Years of Solitude is the inevitable and inescapable repetition of history in Macondo. The protagonists are controlled by their pasts and the complexity of time. Throughout the novel, the characters are visited by ghosts. The ghosts are symbols of the past and the haunting nature it has over Macondo. The ghosts and the displaced repetition that they evoke are, in fact, firmly grounded in the particular development of Latin American history. Ideological transfiguration ensured that Macondo and the Buendias always were ghosts to some extent, alienated and estranged from their own history, not only victims of the harsh reality of dependence and underdevelopment but also of the ideological illusions that haunt and reinforce such social conditions. The fate of Macondo is both doomed and predetermined from its very existence. Fatalism is a metaphor for the particular part that ideology has played in maintaining historical dependence, by locking the interpretation of Latin American history into certain patterns that deny alternative possibilities. The narrative seemingly confirms fatalism in order to illustrate the feeling of entrapment that ideology can performatively create. Garcia Márquez uses colors as symbols. Yellow and gold are the most frequently used and symbolize imperialism and the Spanish siglo de oro. Gold signifies a search for economic wealth, whereas yellow represents death, change, and destruction. The glass city is an image that comes to José Arcadio Buendia in a dream. It is the reason for Macondo's location, but also a symbol of its fate. Higgins writes, by the final page, however, the city of mirrors has become a city of mirages. Macondo thus represents the dream of a brave new world that America seemed to promise and that was cruelly proved illusory by the subsequent course of history. Images such as the glass city and the ice factory represent how Latin America already has its history outlined and is therefore fated for destruction. There is an underlying pattern of Latin American history in 100 Years of Solitude. It has been said that the novel is one of a number of texts that Latin American culture has created to understand itself. In this sense, the novel can be conceived as a linear archive that narrates the story of a Latin America discovered by European explorers, which had its historical entity developed by the printing press. The archive is a symbol of the literature that is the foundation of Latin American history and also a decoding instrument. Melquiades, the keeper of the archive, represents both the whimsical and the literary. Finally, the world of 100 Years of Solitude is a place where beliefs and metaphors become forms of fact, and where more ordinary facts become uncertain. The use of particular historic events and characters renders 100 Years of Solitude an exemplary work of magical realism, wherein the novel compresses centuries of cause and effect whilst telling an interesting story.